Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing something a little bit different. We are going to be doing half tutorial, half exploration on the topic of bankruptcy, half continuing the EIC run, and I know what you're thinking, that's all too many halves, but, you know, three lefts don't make a right, except for they do, and also, three halves do make a whole, they just make a whole plus a little bit extra. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be intentionally bankrupting and developing a strategy around that, which I think has been strong for some time now. This isn't really something I've explored too in depth, but the main penalties for bankruptcy are three. You get a bunch more radicals from standard of living decreases, although radicalism, this is kind of the confounding variable. We are really not sure how it's going to feel differently in 1.8 because movements are so much different, and so I don't know exactly to what extent the radicalism is going to feel bad, or if it juices up some of the movements we like the utilitarian movement, if it's even going to feel good. The second thing is it really hurts your military. You get minus 50%, I think is the number, but if I'm not mistaken, this number is additive with other modifiers, so that minus 50% decaying over the course of 10 years, if you have a plus, if you have 100%, it's going to bring you down to 50%, so that's a 50% decrease in offense and defense. If you have 150% already, what it represents for you is going to be a 33% loss in fighting capability, because moving from 150 to 100 is a 33% loss, and so we'll have stuff like experienced offensive planner, we will have advanced fronts where we will be getting offense from here. We will have mobilization things. So if it is stacking additively, which is my understanding it does, it is not as bad as it looks at first blush, because we have just highlighted here how we have plus 30% in some various ways. But also, there are some contexts where you know you're not going to be fighting anyone that is too scary, and also some contexts where, like, let's say you're playing Great Britain, you really don't care too much about defending because you don't have a land border with anyone, so taking some time off and having low offense and defense really isn't all that big a deal. So those are kind of the first two things that are really wrong with bankruptcy. And the third thing is no longer a thing anymore, which is the construction malice. And that used to be the major reason why going bankruptcy would be bad, is you would get a minus 50% construction malice. They took this away because it made investing in foreign countries feel really bad when they declared bankruptcy, because you would get your construction queue locked. But what this effectively unlocks for us is the strategy of intentionally going to go bankrupt, which is what we're going to be doing today. Future generalist here to talk about the positive effects of bankruptcy, or at least future generalist for that generalist, but not for you. It's still past generalist for you, which is that at first blush, it might seem that, hey, we're just going to be getting this 41 million for free, and it's just free money. Well, most of this is not free money. There is a small amount that's free money, and that has to do with the amount of credit limit that is not related to buildings. The amount is going to be 100K, which is basically inconsequential, plus 5% of our GDP. This is going to be the amount that we are effectively getting for free, because this is the credit limit that is just kind of the base credit limit amount. The rest of the credit limit is actually going to be received from buildings, and it is going to wipe out their cash reserves when we declare bankruptcy, and these will have to be refilled, and it will decrease the weekly balance while they're refilling. This is, for most countries, if you are owning most of your buildings, this is going to be that this is not going to be free money, because this is going to be money that is not being juiced into the economy in terms of consumption, and it's going to be money that is also not going through reinvestment, because it is instead paying out the reserves. It's important to note that even though this isn't a free money modifier for a big chunk of it, it is a targeted modifier in that it is targeting the ownership class. Now, for us in this country, the ownership class is actually in the middle strata for the EIC because of their different classes, which is of course interesting. But importantly, this is a sort of wealth transfer from the hyper wealthy, which is going to negatively affect SOL less. And so even if there were no free money in here, it would still have some benefit in that it is effectively a tax on the pops that have the most money anyways, and when you tax those pops, you negatively affect SOL less than if you tax, the lower strata or something to this effect. However, we have most of our ownership is owned by Great Britain. So if we are paying out less to our owners, that's really not a big deal to us because our owners are in Great Britain, and so it is more advantageous for us to bankrupt. But I just kind of wanted to point this out and make this clear because the benefit is not just 41 million free money. We don't actually receive that much free money. Instead, it is a much more modest sum, which is going to be, if you own all of your buildings, it's going to be roughly 5% of your GDP plus 100K on the flat, which is going to be some amount of free money, and you are effectively using this free money for whatever it is that you spent the money to get bankrupted in. In the case of this run, construction, which is what went to it. Actually, you know what? Actually, where it all really went, where it all went wrong, truly, is we're paying it out to the dirty UK's hands. I just wanted to quickly note that you can also reset your credit limit by revving and then swapping sides to the rev. I believe right after you declare bankruptcy. I'm a little foggy on the exact execution, but you can rev reset bankruptcy as well. We will not be covering this, and this is probably stronger than what we're going to be doing, which is intentionally eating the malices. Alright, so the first thing we're going to make an adjustment for is the increased radicals from decreased standard of living. In particular, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be running really high taxes on grain and opium, and we are going to look to decrease standard of living now before we go bankrupt. And then once we go bankrupt, we're going to rake back some of these taxes and also decrease standard of change up the consumption taxes so they're not so regressive. If we take a look at our POPs, which to be fair, we have different classes than normal because we're on India, and so our ownership class is in the middling tier. But what we are going to be doing is we are going to be taxing the stuff that the lowest rung POPs consume the most of. That way we decrease their SOL the most, in addition to running high taxes, low wages. This should decrease SOL, and then we will slowly turn back the taxes like one notch at a time after we go bankrupt to try and have a trajectory of upward SOL for as long as possible. We also, to that end, might end up investing in a second level of a health system, this sort of stuff, but we are going to be doing that to try and offset that. Also to that end, we are going to be adding some construction sectors because we can afford more construction sectors once we are no longer subjected to this monstrous interest payment. And then we're going to construct a couple rice farms. In particular, these are very, very nice from the perspective of a per construction basis. They don't provide additional cash reserves. You can see here there's 75,000 cash reserves per level. But if we take a look here, it's going to be 75,000 per level here, even though the rice farm per level is going to have double employment. Everything gets doubled, but cash reserves do not. But in particular, that's 75K for a 200 construction cost building. And if you take a look here, it's 25K per level as well on the logging camps. So one thing agrarian buildings are particularly good at is increasing your cash reserve limit. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be trying to build some agrarian buildings here and there and looking to ride the lightning, because as we add more agrarian buildings and as the cash reserves fill up, we will be able to prolong the period before we go bankrupt by extending our line of credit. So this 38 million, this is going to be growing very quickly, but what's also going to grow as we add 200 construction cost buildings relatively quickly is going to be this credit line, this 41.8 million. So as long as these buildings are profitable enough, to employ and fill this up, they will be able to do it on a per construction basis at a lot more line of credit for us, so we can have a longer period of time with which to try and reduce SOL before we go bankrupt. All right, we have taken care. All of our progress on our own government construction is going to get deleted when we declare bankruptcy, so we're actually going to put pause on all this construction, but we are right at the cusp here of bankruptcy. We've progressed maybe 3 or 4 months, and we are about to hit it. It should just be just a second as we try and pass these laws. Of course, everyone shout out to laws. And here we have the bankruptcy. So if we declare bankruptcy, you can see the malice that gets fully acquired. You get this minus prestige. This isn't going to be very important for us currently, but if you're running Sovereign Empire and you're looking to pull people into your block, or you would lose your ability to have a block as a result of decreasing the prestige. This would be a problem. We're locked in at minor power as a subject, so we don't really care about this. Loan interest rate, we do care about this. If once we enter the bankruptcy, or once we figure out the bankruptcy, we are going to try and run a positive balance, but it could be the case that you want to run multiple bankruptcy cycles into each other, just as long as they're not too fast together. It shouldn't be too big a problem. Minus welfare payments multiplier, we don't really care about this. Plus 100% radicals and loyalists from standard of living changes. I assume that's only applying to radicals, but if we get extra loyalists too, that'd be fantastic. And minus 75% offense and defense. Well, I thought this was a 50% penalty, but this is still not as big a deal as it looks, because again, if we're at 130, 140%, and this will be decaying over the course of 10 years, it's not a 75% reduction, it's like a 50% reduction. So we're just going to declare bankruptcy straight away because we don't want to be eating this throughput malice for no reason. And so we are going to go into the positive immediately. We are also going to go into our budget, and we are going to set some stuff up where we are not going to be decreasing SOL of the lower rung pops as much, and we also want to generate it more money. So we are going to, in particular, target with the kind of normal upper rung strata targeting sorts of things, and we can see here we will be running a slight negative balance if we have this, but we are also going to keep the government construction pause and allow the investment pool, which has grown extremely large due to our situation in India, where we have a difficult time expanding construction because of the diplomatic pacts we have to pay out. We are going to be doing this, and so we should be in kind of okay shape. We do have a significant bureaucracy problem, but also privatization was forced on all of our buildings, so this is going to allow our investment pool to buy all these buildings up, which is going to give us a little bit of buffer. We could have had those up for sale a while ago. We probably should have, and that would have given us a little bit more time before bankruptcy. But you can see here, now we're running a positive balance as buildings have been acquired. Things are looking in pretty good shape. We don't want to rake back the taxes more. We probably could, but we are going to choose not to. Instead, as we have this little bit of buffer, and we are also having a bureaucracy problem here, we're actually going to turn government construction back on, and we're going to look to solve the bureaucracy problem. We have qualifications problems, so this is why we're not pushing anything to economies of scale level, and instead we're just going to add 5 in different places, and this is going to be all we add. Hopefully this gold reserve of 1 million is enough to cover this. We again will have an absolutely apocalyptic sort of penalty to loan interest rate because here, we take a look, declared bankruptcy, because we will be getting this minus 49 or plus 49% loan interest rate. We 100% cannot take loans right now, but to be fair, as a minor power, loans, we kind of don't want to take that much anyways, and so we don't want to deficit spend. But in another sort of sense, if we were planning to declare another bankruptcy, it's kind of just a different way of deficit spending, but we should be in fine shape. And the SOL, we saw it decrease a little bit. We probably didn't really punch it down as much as we would have liked, but we are looking to see it recover as we rake back the taxes a little bit, which I think that we are going to maybe go 6 months and then rake back to middling taxes. In particular, I'm not 100% sure how bad this minimum expected standard of living is, and the extra radicals from political movements. This is something we still have to play around with to know how bad or what the negative effects of high taxes are in 1.8. But as it stands right now, we're in okay shape. We're fine. We're constructing. We're living. We're thriving. We can't fight very well, but that's really not that big a deal when you don't have land neighbors. If we were playing like Austria and we were potentially going to fight Prussia, this would be a very significant problem. But as it stands, the way we're expanding is we're expanding in this region, and we're just going to beat up on minor powers. We're just going to beat up some minors, you know? So incidentally, this is our kind of first opportunity here to request a bankroll and actually see when we have a way larger economy than the person who we're receiving bankroll from, exactly the nature of the nerf. 2 bankrolls, which is going to be received in 1.8. We do see, okay, well, they just don't have a front. we'll help them out. But also, focusing more in on the bankruptcy factor, we do see we are increasing in radicals, even having decreased the taxes. But overall, it looks relatively flat, and I think that we can deal with this. This doesn't seem to be too bad, and also, we're trying to demonstrate how expansion is still possible here. We're going after Congo. If you play small ball and you go after some smaller stuff initially after the bankruptcy, it shouldn't be too big a deal, especially because this is going to be decaying over time. Like, right now, it's already down nearly 5%, and we're just barely kind of starting our first war after this, and so it's not really a minus 75% penalty. Over the course of the entire period of post-bankruptcy, it will end up being a minus 37% penalty, which means that you just probably try and time it where you have relatively high infamy, or you're not going to be going for anything too big in terms of what you're going to be doing war-wise, and this should be more straightforward. We'll also keep an eye on this bankroll as well as it comes in. So Prussia sides with Hanover, so we will be abandoning Hanover, and we will not be receiving said bankroll. Alright, so we have our first landing of our battle beginning. Just as a little bit of update with how exactly our bankruptcy modifier is going, we are at minus 68% offense. The guy with whom we are landing, I don't think we are using good supplies, so let's put on good supplies. They won't get it for this battle, but they'll get it for the next battle. Let's also put on chocolate and opium. That way they will get nice and recovered for the second battle. But you can see we're running on 12 offense. That's not a whole lot, but if you're expanding against unrecognized powers, it's really not going to be that big a deal. We have a bigger army than this 10 stack, but we wanted to see if the 10 stack could get in fine enough, and we will also see the gentleman who's leading them. Does he have any sort of offensive planner? No, he does not, but you can farm around for those modifiers to help offset the negative effects of the bankruptcy. Also, if you do find yourself in a war that is particularly difficult, or you get declared on, you can avoid bad wars if you're the one declaring offensively on these, but if you're playing defense, you can just set all your guys to defense and try not to push, especially during the opening periods of this bankruptcy, and it's important to, like, we got an enormous sum of money by declaring that bankruptcy that we were able to leverage to additional construction. Now we're just letting the construction queue kind of idle here, or the active queue. We should be adding a little bit more bureaucracy. To be fair, our bureaucracy is a little bit of a problem. Let's do that and avoid the place that has some infrastructure issues. But the battles here, you can make progress in different areas of the world and still make use of your, low infamy, or still make use of your infamy decay while you are bankrupt. And this is, I think, an important point. You don't get shut off from wars. You kind of get shut off from wars with GPs, but if you happen to be fighting a GP, you can just come in and just set everyone to defend. And generally speaking, the defensive, if you are like mainly infantry, you're going to have a lot more defense than offense. There's going to be a lot of modifiers that you can stack for being very strong defensively. We don't have one on that gentleman, but I know we have some on some of our guys. So this guy is defensive strategist. He gets plus 10% defense, and then if I'm not mistaken, you get rolls, and if you roll particularly high on some of these things, you will get additional army offense and defense. Now, my understanding is that these stack additively, but I have not looked at this extensively. But if we have a minus 60% penalty from our bankruptcy, and then we happen to roll dig in, this dig in is going to be more valuable when we are suffering from a penalty overall. So you start out at 100%. You generally get bonuses that bring you up to like 150%, which is why, you know, we can have infantry that have an offensive value of, 30, even though their base offensive value is 20, right? These plus percent bonuses get so much more valuable when you're running a deficit. And so if we're at if we're down to 40% efficacy as a result of our bankruptcy, and then we have a defensive strategist, and then we roll dug in, and then you can also have tactful. There's a bunch of other things you can have. But if we roll dug in there, we will go from 40%, and then we're also running, in particular, mobilization stuff. Like extra supplies, we will go from like 40% efficacy to 80% efficacy, whereas like pre-bankruptcy, we would have been, going up to 140% efficacy. So it represents a doubling of our offense and defense instead of, a plus 40% when we're in bankruptcy. But the idea is that the penalty is not as bad as it initially looks. Like, to be fair, it's not ideal to be running this negative offense and defense, but that's not so bad. And also, the radicals from standard of living decreases, this modifier is as bad as it's going to be right now, and it's still not like this tremendously awful thing, and we still haven't raked back, taxes a little bit more, which we're planning on doing, although we do have some issues in that our Diplopact, as we make more money, is getting more and more expensive. We're going to look to break free from Britain relatively soon. We just do want to finish this journal entry before we do that. So this is kind of the penalties from declaring bankruptcy are not anywhere near as bad as they used to be, because it used to be, on top of this, you would get a 75% construction malus. And that means your economy just basically comes to a halt in terms of economic growth. But we're not experiencing that here. And if we were to try and avoid the bankruptcy, we would have had to actually, deleting construction wouldn't have even worked in this particular case, but in most cases, the amount of construction you'd have to delete is going to be really substantive. And when you can just declare bankruptcy in some spots, I don't think it's necessarily universal, but I think that it was particularly good for us here in the East India Company. We were planning on showcasing this in Jewish Japan, where we were on an island with all of our incorporated states, so that the defensive and offensive penalty would not have been as bad. Although it does apply to boats, it is far easier to defend a coastline with just a single strategic region. So for a country like Japan, I think that this strategy could be particularly good because you're not going to get yourself into a situation where you're going to get very many war goals imposed on you in the first 3 to 5 years of the bankruptcy that are just absolutely backbreaking, and instead you can just look to run it up and just repeatedly bankrupt, especially if you actually want to decrease in power rank. There's reasons to want to be a minor power, like everything costing less infamy. It makes it so you can't have a power block, but you can make stuff cost less infamy, and you can use it to join other power blocks in this type of stuff. So in some cases, depending on what you're doing, the modifier from this minus prestige modifier might actually be really good. And then if you're unrecognized anyways, or if you're a minor power anyways, this low interest rate, you don't want to go into debt anyways, and so you'll be in good shape. We're gonna peel off another few months here and kind of see what happens in regards to watching both our balance and the radicals and this sort of stuff. But I think that the main ideas behind bankruptcy really not being that bad have already been kind of highlighted here. So before we kind of give a little bit of an update at this later timestamp, I just wanted to point out that there is a little bit of a confounding variable going on, in that there is low access to the British market, which is negatively affecting things and is causing SOL to go down when it otherwise maybe shouldn't be. I just wanted to point this out as a little bit of a confound when we're talking through some of this analysis we're about to get into. So some more time has passed, and we just wanted to check in on the radicalism, and roughly it's still increasing, it's still coming up, but it's kind of flattening out to some extent, and to another extent, the thing that you really want to avoid with the radicalism is, in particular, running enough radicalism to generate turmoil. We don't even have turmoil there, that's crazy. But the radicals in general, to some extent, they are a little bit of a good thing, because they juice up your movements, and they allow your movements, once these guys get to a high enough level of activism, for example, then we can get to the point where we can juice up and start to pass this movement. Although interesting that they do generate, so we in particular need radicalism in order to get activism, and so in order to use these guys to pass laws, radicals are actually a good thing. They're just kind of a bad thing when they come to turmoil, but relatively speaking, it's flattening out. And the other malices, or the other kind of malice, which is the negative army, this is going to slowly decay out and be much less of a problem. We're avoiding to pay the loan interest rate, mainly because we're selling off to our kind of juiced up investment pools. So this is maybe another situation where the relatively backward countries that have a hard time fully utilizing their investment pool, like once we finish building government administrations, we're just going to let the investment pool take over here. They might be better suited for the strategy. Really, Japan seemed ideal for the strategy, which is kind of why we were saving the idea for showcasing it with Japan. But so far, all the penalties really aren't that bad, and the amount of extra construction we're getting from declaring bankruptcy is enormous. We've kind of already reviewed a lot of these features here, and just kind of wanting to update where exactly things are. The only thing is, if we fought a tremendous war at this point in time, we would be in really rough shape, and so that is something to be avoided. But I think we're going to fight the UK relatively soon, and the UK has to land us, and the landing penalty is going to be very soon more substantive than the penalty we're getting from declared bankruptcy. So I think we'll be in fine shape. But I hope you enjoyed this little mini episode / tutorial, taking a closer look at the bankruptcy sort of thing. I do think it's potentially a really strong strategy, not universally, but in some spots, but perhaps even universally. It is just a little bit cheesy or cheeky. Definitely rev resetting the bankruptcy is probably better. But in any case, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, feel free to comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm thing, and other than that, have a good one.